We have our first session. So I'd like to invite the panelists to join me on stage. It's in keeping with our focus on, please come join me. In keeping with our focus on education, which is sort of the sub-theme of this whole event, with our main themes being U.S. competitiveness, jobs, economic growth, and urban revival. When we did this conference last year, we realized that almost every session in some way or another touched on the challenge that education is posing for our country, and the fact that we really don't have a sufficiently trained workforce, we don't have a sufficient mindset for the economy we're moving into. So we decided to really make a much deeper commitment to this theme of education and learning for this year's Techonomy, which is why we're starting today's conference with this session. And I think you're going to find that there's a lot of really interesting things going on, but I also just would reiterate what I said when I first walked out this morning. We see this as the area which is probably more than any other urgent for the United States, that we're just not taking it seriously enough. A lot of other countries are, and I think when you hear some of our panelists, you may agree that there's some changes in thinking necessary. So let me just quickly introduce the panelists here. Marlon Page, founder of Sisters Code. She's somebody who's going to talk to us about a new organization she's just started. A longtime friend of mine, Tae Yu of Cisco Systems, who's the Senior Vice President for Corporate Affairs and in charge of their network academies, among other things, very involved in a lot of their public work. John Covington, who's the Chancellor of the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan, which if you don't know about it, you're going to be blown away by some of the things he's doing. And finally, Hector Ruiz, another person who I've known for many years, who's chairman of Advanced Nanotechnology Solutions, which is a startup, but who has had a very eminent career in business. He was CEO of AMD, among other things. And I just have to throw in one of the things that I've written a lot about Hector, and Hector was actually born and raised in Mexico, but had the good fortune of living on the border and going to school in Texas even while he lived in Mexico, and then he graduated as valedictorian of his high school over the border and ended up going to UT and Rice, and then became CEO of a major American company. So he's an unusual American CEO. Now, I want to... Yeah, that's pretty cool. I want to start with you, John. Just talk a little bit about what you're doing and why, and what the Educational Achievement Authority is thinking about what a school ought to be.
Thanks, David. First of all, the Education Achievement Authority of Michigan is responsible for the persistently lowest achieving schools across the entire state. And we started the initiative here in Detroit with the first 15 schools. And we're using the EAA as a catalyst for change to serve as a disruption, if you will, a positive disruption to traditional public schooling, and provide a 21st century prototype for teaching and learning. We know that many of the students that we get, although they are 3 or more years below grade level, these young people exit their mother's womb with a laptop in one hand or an iPod in the other, and we're still trying to teach them with chalk and talk fashion, or and it's not getting them where they need to be. And so we utilize technology to provide a delivery system, an instructional delivery system, to get children back toward grade level. It's a fascinating system. We don't do grade levels, for example. No grades. There's no kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, so forth and so on. That old model that we know that this country should have moved away from years ago because it's no longer applicable to 21st century digital native young people. So rather than have grade levels, we have specific local curriculum frameworks that's tailored to the unique needs of children, and they progress through these instructional levels based on mastery rather than based on the amount of time that they sit in the seat. We start school on September the 4th, and students are not out until August the 6th.
Did you pick up on that one? They only have 30 days off in the summer. And we've taken it for granted, oh, well, kids are off in the summer for 3 months. That's just some historical artifact from the 19th century, which is not relevant. And what's the average number of school days in some of other countries that we compete with?
Well, that was the whole, that was really important for us to add the school days. And if we say that in our mission that we want our students to be competitive with their international counterparts, and then you have China and Japan in school in excess of 230 days, and then our students on average is in school 180 days, and then they're already 3 or more years below grade level, we can't compete with that.
Right.
And so it was important that we added the school day and then added a structure where students could accelerate back toward grade level and beyond very quickly.
So just quickly, you're starting with the worst schools with this radical reform. Do you think ultimately this model has to spread to all the schools in Michigan and the United States, or a model along these lines?
Well, I think it's a model that's going to have to change, period, whether it's in Detroit or whether it's in Chicago or Philadelphia or LA Unified, it doesn't matter. We believe it's primarily as a result of our basic philosophical belief that the problem with American public schooling is that we're still running this factory model of education that's no longer useful to 21st century digital native young people. They learn in different ways, they're wired different, and so we have to teach them in different ways.
I'm very excited to have you here, so hope to hear more as we go on. You know, and when I think about why Techonomy is focusing on education and why technology is a key issue in thinking about education, there's really 2 fundamental reasons. One is we have to teach students different things, not just K through 12, but lifelong. But number 2, we've got a whole new range of ways to teach that technology is providing for us that really are potentially poised to revolutionize the process. But Tay, I want you to just talk a little bit about either or both of those things from the standpoint of one of the biggest global companies, Cisco. How does Cisco think about this, and why are you guys so involved in education?
So well, there's an historical reason, because Cisco came out of Stanford University. And you know, when you think about a lot of the great companies, many of them do come out of a partnership with the academic environment. We look at education as really the lifeblood of our own sustainability as a company, because technology is important, but it ages, and it ages quickly. It's really the people behind that make it important, that make the company what it is. So the employee base becomes very important. We approached education from a jobs perspective. So if you look at the fact that, you know, the latest data is that by 2020, over 90% of the jobs would have some technology component, and probably 100% of the jobs, you know, would be technology enabled. What we wanted to do was to take a look at how do we create an environment for students, whether they're in middle school or whether there is a second career transitioning from the industrial economy to the knowledge economy, how do you learn and participate, particularly in an area that we have an expertise, which is networking? And that's how the Networking Academy program came about. And what's interesting is we've had a grandmother who was 83 years old in the program, and then we had middle school students. And the reality of it is that it didn't really matter as long as the curriculum was globally competitive. So in 2002, I was in Afghanistan, and we opened the first NetAcad, and we had 6 women in the class. Now, the lowest score after the first semester was a 94, which meant that they were as competitive as students in a private school in New York City, for instance, who were taking the same curriculum. And the point of it is the academy is not static either. You know, as new technologies and social media become available, you incorporate that into it. And I think that that's the really important piece of education, is agility and fluidity, because new ideas are forming, and students themselves, as they work collaboratively, come up with different kinds of solutions and find ways to apply what they're learning. And that's really the focus of what we're trying to do, is that education needs to be lifelong, fluid, agile, and adaptive.
Thank you. You know, Marlon, you yourself have a career that's been in IT.
Yes.
But you've now kind of, picking up on some of the things Tay talked about, really decided that you're committing yourself to really changing the mindset of young people and old people, right. About how they ought to think about their own learning and what they ought to know about. Talk a little bit about what you're doing.
Well,
Just to give you a little background, I started off as an aspiring mortician. I graduated from Wayne State University, go Warriors. Thank you. But 25 years ago, and I'm dating myself, when I was in high school, I had no idea that technology was a choice for me. And I just kind of decided mortuary science was what I would do. And as I was an aspiring mortician and a middle school teacher, someone told me about a program at CompuWare Corporation where you could learn during the summer to program in 7 different languages in 13 weeks. Well, I'm up for the challenge, sure. And they pay you. And so I went and I did that. And it was amazing just to see the lack of females in that environment. And so from there, I went on to do some other things in technology. And one thing that I was tapped to do was to partner with Microsoft Corporation. And so I traveled to encourage young girls to just consider the field of technology, just to consider that you can do something different. Not saying you have to become a coder, but technology is prevalent in every industry. Whatever you're going to do, then you can do that. And so I thought about, had I not learned untraditionally to code, my life would not be what it is right now. So I founded the company Sisters Code, which is 2 weeks old maybe. And
Oh, we got you just in time.
about 2 weeks. But Sisters Code's mission is to educate, empower, and entice women ages 25 to 85 to explore the world of coding and technology. So we teach them JavaScript, because HTML is just not coding, but anyway. I'm really a geek. But so JavaScript is what we teach them, and it has been amazing. We've had 4 classes, and just to see the light bulb come on and people are learning to do this untraditional, you don't have to go to college to do this. You can learn in a manner that is 100% untraditional. So that's what's going on with me.
Well, we love what you're doing. We love that you're a lifelong Detroiter on our opening panel, too. So
Yes.
thank you for all that. And let's continue on all these themes. Hector, so you have a lot of interesting things about you, which I mentioned before, but you're a geek. You're an engineer. Been in the chip industry your career. And you now are really becoming an educational activist in a somewhat unpredictable way, or a way that many people here might be surprised to learn about. So tell us what you're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you, David. And one of the things I love about the economy is that this optimism that we talk about. But optimism doesn't mean that you don't have, you could wake up every morning with, I call it, a healthy level of discontent and still be an optimist. And one of the things that I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm going to talk very narrowly about what's going on in that part of the world, because I think it's probably applicable to the rest of the country. But we've gone through budget cuts. Texas is one of the bottom 5 states in education in terms of any measure that you choose, ranks at the bottom 5. And usually when you have budget cuts, what they tend to do, they tend to hit hardest the people that are at the bottom of the pile, people that are on the underrepresented parts of the state, people of color. And so one of the things that's happened in the last few years through the budget cuts is that immediately the schools that are mostly Latino or Black end up having a disproportionate amount of cutting that occurs. And one of the things that I became aware of it in the last few years was that the place where they got hit the most was in the humanities. People wanted to still teach math and science, but they wanted to cut the humanities. And that really bothered me, because I'm a strong believer that a whole person cannot be a whole person unless you have a broad exposure to education. And so I got involved with a group of people. We formed a nonprofit called the Hispanic Alliance for the Performing Arts, HAPA for short. And we partnered with a school in East Austin called the East Austin Preparatory Academy, which is 95% Latino and Black kids. And it's the most fascinating place for you to see. If you ever go to East Austin, you're going to find this place that sits right in the middle of East Austin. And all around, all the buildings are covered with graffiti. And the East Austin Preparatory Academy is the only building in that place where there's absolutely no graffiti. And what the kids that go there, we partner with them to create an after-school program that is really rigorous. It teaches them music and art, and you have to sign a contract. Your parents have to sign a contract. You have to go 2 or 3 hours after school and all day Saturday. And these kids, we have a long waiting list. As a matter of fact, I'm shocked at the interest that has been expressed in this. And we haven't been able to serve all the kids that have an interest in doing that. But to me, the most fascinating statistics of this has been going on for a few years, are two things. One, these kids have never seen an instrument in their lives, never even knew what a clarinet was. All of a sudden, within 6 months, they are performing with the Austin Symphony Orchestra and playing all kinds of music. And it's just fascinating to see these kids. That's very impressive. The second thing I found most impressive, too, is that all these kids that sign up for these programs are doing 20 to 30% better in science and math than the kids that didn't sign up. And to me, that just continues to underline the importance of humanities, and particularly in the underrepresented groups, who tend to be the ones hurt the most through budget cuts.
Now, what would give it those stats? There was another. You were talking to me this morning about this report that was just issued by
The National Academy of Sciences and Arts just issued a report this year that's called The Heart of the Matter. So you could look it up. And it's an amazing report. And it gives you a lot of statistics and important facts about how important it is that we don't neglect humanities in our thrust to try to get more competitive in the sciences and math. What's important to note is in this report, it underlines the importance that we're definitely moving into a world where everybody needs to do things on the internet. We all our banking, all our purchasing, all those things, and that we have to become somewhat conversant enough so that we are good citizens of this country. And by good citizens means you understand what's being done, you understand how things operate, you understand the people you're voting for in government so that you're taking into account the things. And for that reason, there has to be this very competitive level of understanding of basic science and math. But it is critically important, as the report concludes, is that while science and math can provide some level of motivation and preparation for the world, nothing can inspire you like being exposed to the humanities, being social studies, art, music, etc. And that is really critical that we don't neglect this going forward so that the citizens of this country can truly focus on, and the conclusion of the report is that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is strongly founded on the idea of a broad education exposure to all our kids.
Tay, I see you nodding. What's your response to that?
Well, so when people talk about technology specifically, there's two kind of buckets. One is technology as a tool to do something else with it. And then the other is technology as a destination, so that you're creating something. And both of those are highly influenced by the creative side of people, because what people don't understand is that, before you start to code, you actually design and architect what you're trying to build. And then when you run into a stumbling block while you're coding, it's your creative ability and the collaborative nature with other parts of your organization or your team to help, break through those blockages. So, the whole point is that you're creating to actually do something, that what you produce helps you do something. And it's part of the humanities and your life experiences that this should enhance. There is, as an academic, learning for learning's sake, but the majority of it is really about applying it toward specific solutions in our society.
And in fact, I'm sorry, Dave. No, the one thing that I think is important to try to understand is that universities today are beginning to look a little bit like the government. They're being lobbied by businesses to do things which may not necessarily be an education. And so when a university is short of funds and somebody comes along with a business proposition to say, if you teach these courses, I'll give you money. But, generally speaking, those courses are in the rearview mirror. Universities really should be looking at 10, 20 years. What's going to be, if we take things to extreme, or as we tend to do in this country, if we teach everybody coding, pretty soon we would be creating the government worker of the future. So we got to be careful that we don't influence universities in the wrong way. So one of the pet peeves I have, and I have the opportunity to influence that a little bit because I'm on the board of several universities, that is they got to focus on education as it was intended to be. That's 10, 20 years out. Be creative, be thoughtful. I mean, that's the only chance in your life you're ever going to have to really think outside the box. Once you get out, you're done.
John, I wanted to ask your thoughts on this because, is the question teaching people to get the jobs that are going to be there, or is it about teaching them to learn to think and to be creative? And how do you approach that in your program?
Well, first of all, we think is to teach young people to be critical and analytical thinkers. When we say we want to prepare children for the job market, when you consider the fact that many of the jobs that our students will enter into haven't even been created yet. And so that's ongoing. And so we have to make sure that students are completing their secondary school experience not only college and career ready, but what we call next generation ready. That they are walking across the stage and we place in their hands a diploma that means something and it's going to take them for the rest of their lives. We utilize heavily, our platform is based heavily on technology where students are required to learn, practice, and then apply. They create several evidences that they will present to the teacher that demonstrate that they have mastered the requisite skills that they need to have before they move to the next level. For some people, they're a little confused about what we do, and they think that we sit children in front of a computer all day, and that's not our system. The computer is nothing more than a tool for teaching and learning, pretty much like the textbook was for us when we were in school.
So does this contradict anything you think? How do you're doing Sisters Code. I mean, how do you contextualize what you're doing in terms of this idea of also being a critical thinker and learning to be creative and really creating whole people who also can contribute to the economy?
It's just the essence of who I am. I learned to code untraditionally. So before that, my formal degree is public relations. So I can communicate well, I think.
It seems like you can.
If not, let me know after this, but I think I can.
I would say so.
Okay, so public relations, then I have mortuary science. I didn't
We're not going to go there.
I didn't come to the table just knowing how to code. So I agree, it is this whole person. So when I'm out here speaking with women or young girls, for instance, my daughter, 14 years old, loves photography. I'm a techie. So how can I take her love for photography and introduce technology in there? So she's learning it without knowing that she's really learning it because it's a lot of fun. So it doesn't contradict at all. I do believe that you have to be a whole person, and it's not about just teaching people coding. So with Sisters Code, we have made it like a circle of transformation. After you learn how to code, so what? What does that mean? What do you do next? Do you want to even do this? So for us, it is empowering women and young girls just to know that they can do something different. And it might not be coding, but if you are able to learn this thing, then it opens up a world to you that you can just do something different. Just consider that you can do something a little bit differently. So no, it doesn't contradict at all. I don't think that when I learned to code, I sat next to people who had degrees in computer science, and I could call, my first assignment was at Ford Motor Company, and we were developing software, and I could sit right with them, and I could develop code right along with them, and they had a formal 4-year degree in it. So definitely, I think unconventional is the way to go.
Unfortunately, it makes it all sound very hard because we have to teach young people and old people all this stuff. And so, I want to turn back to you, Tay, a representative of one of the giant companies. Do you think that corporations understand the scope of the challenge and are doing enough to help the United States push its educational system forward? And if not, what should they be doing?
So I think corporations do understand the magnitude of, I like to think, opportunity rather than challenge. And I think that corporations are working with public sector to try and make some changes. Now, we still have a lot of work to do. I think, though, that public sector is also, and you see it here in Detroit, really focused on developing the economy. And so we're looking at it from the economy backwards. Educators are looking at it from making sure that you have the humanities and the basic capability for lifelong learning, the adaptability. And then there's this sweet spot called innovation the both of us, because for corporations, market share is won and lost during market transitions, and I think you saw that firsthand in Detroit when you looked at the auto industry. And so what we're looking for is how do we continue the cycle of innovation, that students are armed with the ability to adapt and be innovative. We talk about the Internet of Everything right now, which is the fact that right now everybody is focused on getting devices connected, the Internet of Things. But the reality is the Internet of Everything is it's a confluence, the convergence of not just data, but also the devices and people and processes, and bringing them together and being able to innovate solutions in terms of healthcare and education. I think in Michigan, healthcare is a major growth sector in terms of jobs. And if you were just to look at the healthcare industry, the providers, and the acquisitions that they have made over the last several years of small startup companies, that would give you insight into some of the innovative things that are happening. So it's really it's a combination of free thinking and innovation, but also looking at grounding it around some sort of a framework around maybe a mega industry or building a cluster, something that Detroit has known how to do for a very long time, but it remade in the 21st century.
Yeah, so you think a lot about what are the industries that are going to really matter in 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. So Hector, you've spent a lot of time with CEOs, you were one. Do you think that CEOs are doing enough to tackle this issue in the United States?
Well, I think
and the
that,
companies they lead?
I think part of the issue here is that today, and let's talk about public companies for the moment, but today's the pressure on CEOs to do the things that they're expected to do, such as deliver profitability quarter after quarter, is so intense and so immense that I think the amount of time and energy they have to devote to looking at the 10, 20-year educational system, frankly, is very small. And I'm not blaming them. The issue is just the way the system is today. There are a few mavericks out there, and I think John Chambers happens to be one at Cisco, who really have the chutzpah, whatever you want to call it, to really stand up and think ahead, more so than so many others that I know.
Do you see sufficient leadership emerging from anywhere to really solve these problems?
Well, I think there's a new breed of CEOs today in some of the new companies that seem to be more concerned about figuring out ways in which their technology and their products could actually make the world better, i.e. education being one of them. And so I'm optimistic that the new breed of CEOs will actually be far better than the one that I was part of in trying to see as part of the responsibility the need to help our country become better, not just deliver the profitability.
But even in the products and services they're creating, you're saying?
That's correct.
By the way, let's get the house lights up, and if anybody has comments or questions, please go to the mics.
I think, Dave, that corporation CEOs, I think they are acutely aware of the problems, particularly with public education. I think they also sometimes get frustrated with for lack of a better word, the product that's coming out of America's public schools. And when I say they understand, because if you look at the workspace and the manner in which those employees for corporations work, like through collaboration, it's totally different than the workplace in corporate space 20, 30, 40 years ago. But if you look at our public schools, you see that, and I often use the story of Wally and Beaver Cleaver and their friend who lived across the street, Eddie Haskell. If we were somehow able to resurrect Wally, Beaver, and Eddie and have them to walk the corridors of our schools, the only thing that might strike them is a little odd is the ethnicity of the children in the building and maybe this strange transistor radio that the kids are walking up and down the halls with. But as soon as Wally and Beaver go into the classroom and sit down, they're going to feel a lot more at home than the current kids. And that's the reason for that is we haven't changed. And so the corporate world, they have made that transition. And we still are lagging behind, moving forward in horse and buggy fashion. And if we're going to help this our nation become or maintain its economic viability, then we're going to have to use technology in more creative and innovative ways in our public schools.
And I like to challenge the thought of the CEO being the person that's the catalyst for the change. Where are the radical people? Where are we that are going to our CEOs and challenging them? When I worked at CompuWare, they would laugh at me, but I would say, where's Pete? I need to find him, which is Peter Karanos, who was the CEO at the time. There are some things we need to do. You know, I live in the city of Detroit. I was born here. I've been here 43 years. This is my place. So there are some things that need to change. There's some things that are happening. So someone has to be radical because he is thinking about the bottom line, which he should be. But where are the people? Where are the people that aren't afraid, that are going to go and challenge people to say these things need to change? When I was deputy CIO for the city of Detroit, I'll never forget, I came in there and I'm like, yes, we can do some things. And all I wanted to do was to give our citizens a chance to interact with city government via the internet. And I'll never forget, there was a man there who said, the people in Detroit don't want to do that. They don't want to pay property taxes online. I can't tell you what I said then because this is a public forum.
But I'm glad you said it, whatever it was.
I said it, and we were able to do it, but it was tough. It was years in the making. So I would challenge us that want to talk about the CEO or the leader. We have to become the leaders.
All right,
We're the
that's
catalyst
good.
for change.
All right, so we have a bunch of people over here. Come to the mic and let's make it real fast. Get a quick question and a quick response so we can get through as many people as possible. Identify yourself.
Comment, and that is that the cultural community is part of the revolution of which you speak. I work with the Henry Ford here in Dearborn, Michigan, and we are literally preparing to launch a learning revolution. We work with Dr. Covington and the EAA. We've developed curriculum to try to bring innovation and innovative thinking and entrepreneurial spirit as a habit from kids grades 6 through 12. We've got actual curricula that we have now being used in public schools, in private schools, in home schools, universities as well. So I hope that when Techonomy is in Detroit next year, you invite some representatives from the Henry Ford to talk about how we've got this revolution ignited and led here in Detroit.
I love that idea, and let's make sure we talk to me or somebody else on the team.
I actually would like to make a follow on both these comments here. First of all, I think CEOs are rebels. A lot of them are really challenging, and particularly the younger generation, the newer companies that are coming, but also some of the more larger companies. They're looking for a partner in the public school system as well.
Yeah, there are not too many John Covingtons out there.
Exactly. So they're looking for a partner on the other side because you can get good talent anywhere in the world these days. And the biggest concern that we have is this big divide that's happening and this larger proportion of what traditionally were middle class families are not middle class anymore, and the job prospects are dependent on educational attainment, not just a degree, but capabilities. Right. But on the other hand, the good news, because I am an optimist, is the fact that,
we only allow optimists.
Exactly.
Here,
but technology is optimism. And this gentleman just said was that there is a lot of work happening. There's a lot of pilots where it's a little bit chaotic and in the storming phases, but there are a lot of proof of concepts out there that are more than just a year or two old all over the country. So I still think that at some point they should and will come together.
Well, what I like, again, why Techonomy is in Detroit, what John is doing is radical. And you said there was something in Tennessee and something in New Orleans, and other than that, there's nowhere else in the country that's doing anything analogous to what you're doing. So New Orleans, which was devastated by Katrina, Detroit, which is devastated, these are the places that recognize we got to do things differently, and you're now creating a model for the whole country, which I think is fantastic. I want to get to some more people over here. And identify yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Victoria Bell. I'm a Wayne State University graduate, and I'm also on the alumni board. I'm also on the board for Green Living Science that partners with Detroit Public Schools to teach STEM curricula and activities through recycling. I'm wondering why there's no representation of the youth of the city here when they are our future and our whole. I guess this is a great part of what we need to include in future venues, seminars, forums. We actually need to have youth here to get some of their opinions because they will be developing the technology, they will be using the technology, and they will be dictating what will be bought and sold. So we need that representation on a wider scale.
I love comments. I love that comment. We don't have to respond to it, except that I will say we do have some young people here. We do need more, and it's a good thing to challenge us with. There's only, you do what you can do.
Right
but
there, see?
we got a bunch of young people. Please, wait, thank you.
They all
Okay.
self-identified.
We'll have more. Get us more. Help us do that next year, will you, please? Okay, next.
Sure, Adam Miller. I just want a quick question about vocational training. The Michigan Manufacturing Association has a great summer program, but they're only able to do 20 kids this summer to train kids in, how to work a CNC machine, because now there's only one manual labor job on a factory floor.
CNC is what?
I know as much as you. It's the.
Well, don't use the acronym, baby, if you don't know what it means. But anyway, okay.
Every plastic injection molding machine, essentially, that Husky makes, they teach the kids how to program the machines, because there's only one manual job. There's only one guy sweeping the floor. Everyone else is programming one of these machines. How can we better vocational training in this country to create, like the lady from Cisco was speaking about, middle-class jobs? And so we've got a lot of great middle-class jobs, and especially as this manufacturing renaissance continues, what can we do in the vocational space?
Maybe one answer is for you to just quickly describe the network academies and what they do,
Yeah,
because Cisco has made a huge commitment to that kind of thing.
It actually started out as a vocational, is the 21st century vocational occupation, going from an industrial economy to a knowledge economy. And what we found was that, and I used to run the Channels organization, which is our distribution channel, and we had a training program that would enable our partners to be able to service our customers as well as we did directly. And after they got a certification, one of our other partners would recruit these certified individuals, and Hector, you probably saw the same thing happening, and that's when we realized there was a dearth of expertise out there. And that's when we decided that we would work with states. So we started in 6 states in the US, and it quickly turned into something that, to be quite frank, grew beyond what we had actually envisioned. It's in 165 countries. And the thing that's interesting, and Henry Ford is actually one of the community colleges that runs this program, is that we don't charge for it. And it's at the willingness of the institution. They fund the teacher and the room. We will give the curriculum and all updates free of charge and do some training, but it's a real public-private partnership, and I think that that's the real sustainability of vocational jobs, is that it's a partnership. You can't depend on public sector just to throw things out there, because you need that healthy tension. We like it when the schools come back to us and say, this works, this doesn't work, this is culturally appropriate for us, this is not. And so you need that healthy tension, so it ultimately has to result in a community-owned, locally supported, but partnered with the corporations. That would be one answer.
Real fast.
Yeah, sure, really quickly. We still live in what I would call an elitist society, where we think that the only way to ascend to the American dream is through the traditional 4-year university pathway. And that's not true. We're going to have to do a much better job in promoting career and technical education or vocational education, because that's really the wave of the future. And it's not necessarily the traditional 4-year collegiate degree. We've partnered with Henry Ford, Wayne County Community College, and Focus Hope to make sure that students have direct access to 21st century job skills when they graduate, and then they're able to complete their secondary school experience while concurrently completing an associate's degree in a chosen career path, so that once they graduate high school, if they don't want to go on to college, they can go directly into the workforce, next generation.
That's terrific. I could see all 4 of you partnering in one way or another. I mean, I got to think the Sisters Code and Network Academies could be very interesting
But
together.
we're in some of the same institutions.
Yeah, well,
already,
keep
yeah.
doing it. We got to wrap, but this conversation could go on all day, and in some ways it will. Thank you all for coming. It's been a terrific conversation to start our dialogue.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean.